Scripture today is from John 4, verses 4 through 24. But he had to go through Samaria. So he came to a Samaritan city called Sychar, near the plot of ground that Jacob had given to his son Joseph. Jacob's well was there, and Jesus, tired out by his journey, was sitting by the well. It was about noon. A Samaritan woman came to draw water, and Jesus said to her, "Give me a drink." His disciples had gone to the city to buy food. The Samaritan woman said to him, "How is it that you, a Jew, ask a drink of me, a woman of Samaria?" Jews do not share things in common with Samaritans. But Jesus answered her, "If you knew the gift of God, and who it is that is saying to you, 'Give me a drink,' you would have asked him, and he would have given you living water." The woman said to him, "Sir, you have no bucket, and the well is deep. Where do you get that living water? Are you greater than our ancestor Jacob, who gave us the well, and with his sons and his flocks drank from it?" Jesus said to her, "Everyone who drinks of this water will be thirsty again, but those who drink of the water that I will give them will never be thirsty. The water that I will give will become in them a spring of water gushing up to eternal life." The woman said to him, "Sir, you give me this water so that I never be thirsty again or have to keep coming here to draw water." Jesus said to her, "Go, call your husband and come back." The woman answered him, "I have no husband." Jesus said to her, "You are right in saying, 'I have no husband,' for you have had 5 husbands, and the one you have now is not your husband. What you have said is true." The woman said to him, "Sir, I see that you are a prophet. Our ancestors worshipped on this mountain, but you say that the place where people must worship is in Jerusalem." Jesus said to her, "Woman, believe me, the hour is coming when you will worship the Father neither on this mountain nor in Jerusalem. You worship what you do not know. We worship what we know, for salvation is from the Jews. But the hour is coming, and is now here, when the true worshipers will worship the Father in spirit and truth. For the Father seeks such as these to worship him. God is spirit, and those who worship him must worship in spirit and truth."
I have to admit that I had reservations about going on this trip. Not because of malaria or typhoid or yellow fever, because that could be taken care of. I was nervous because when I went to a wellspring, Wine for Water, and heard those stories about young girls that walked for water for miles instead of going to school, or young women who had children that they needed to take care of and they were walking sometimes in the middle of the night, the tears just flew. You know, I thought, I can't go on this trip. I'm going to be crying the whole time. But I decided to go, and I'm really glad that I did, because it's a life-changing experience.
The people I met in Kenya struggle to survive, and yet they have hopes and dreams just like I do. And I was just amazed at the whole experience.
The first gal, Doreen, was telling that when the rainy season was on, she could go and collect in the rock catchments and get pretty clean water. But during the dry season, she had to walk for miles, 12 miles to go and get water. She would leave in the middle of the night so that she could be back by 8 o'clock when her children had to go to school, because she needed water to send to school. There was no water at the school.
One day we were invited to a pond, I'll call it, large pond with reddish brown water. we were invited to scoop some of that water up and pour it into a 5-gallon can. Oh, did I ever realize, especially afterwards, that that water, putrid water, is going to be consumed by adults and children and babies. Yet it's filled with cholera and typhoid and whatever else it carries. This has been going on for generations, after generation after generation. So that touched my heart. And that's the urgency and the heartbreak that I carry.
When we got to that last one where she had had water enough that she could dig her own trench and get her pipes hooked up, and then she had water on her place, and that was allowing her to, instead of walking for water, she was planting trees and making bricks. You could see the joy, you could see the smiles, and it's why we need to support water.
I just want to do what I can. This is why I give money to Wellspring.
Majidi Uhai, water is life. No water, no life. Water is life. Those were the words a group of school children left us with after they had welcomed us to their school with songs. Water is life. I wanted to start out this morning with the reading of the woman at the well, because I want to share with you a couple of stories of women that we met who also had to go for water. Now, our scripture reading that we have this morning is almost always called the story of the woman at the well. We don't know this woman's name even. It seems like a simple story of Jesus traveling through a place, resting by the side of a well as his disciples go on to find food, entering into a conversation with a woman who has come to draw water at that same well, even asking her for a favor, that she might give him a drink. But like almost all of the stories about Jesus, there is a lot more to this one than first meets the eye. The text tells us that Jesus had to pass through Samaria. Now, there are different ways to understand that. And scholars who have studied the geography and the maps of that area during ancient times, who have studied the text of the Gospel of John, saying that going through Samaria was not the only route that Jesus could have taken to get from where he was to where he was going. Jesus may have had to travel through Samaria because he was keeping an appointment that only he knew about, an appointment with an unnamed woman at a well. She was not just any woman. The disciples would have been quick to point out to any of us or Jesus all the reasons why he should not be talking with this woman. First of all, she was a woman, and she was a Samaritan woman. Our text says that even she understands that Jesus shouldn't be talking to her. You would ask me, a Samaritan, for a drink? She understands that this just isn't done. This isn't right. Samaritans and Jews didn't get along. They didn't mix, and they did not ask one another for help. Alongside being a Samaritan, this woman was an outcast even from her own people. There is a reason why she is alone at the well getting water. It's the wrong time of day for anyone who knows anything in that area to go and get water. Drawing and carrying water was hot work. It was hard work, and it was much more easily done in the cool of the early morning or the evening. Why would anybody go out in the noontime heat to do the hottest work of the day? But that is exactly when this woman comes. And as she talks with Jesus, we discover why. She has been married 5 times. Now, we're not told how this came about. Either she has had the misfortune of having 5 husbands die on her, or she has been sent away by 5 different men. Or perhaps some combination of the two. But whatever has happened, the man that she lives with now won't even marry her. Her circumstances make it uncomfortable, likely miserable, for her to go for water in the morning or the evening with the other women of the village, because she was the village scandal. So here she is at the hottest time of the day doing one of the most physically demanding jobs of the day. And you have to wonder, why does she even bother? Because she has to. Water is a constant necessity of life. And because it seems that getting water has for centuries been women's work. In many parts of Africa, it is still the woman's job to do whatever it takes to get water for their families. We asked people about that when we were there. Why is it that the women have to do this? And sometimes they would say, because that is the way it is. That is our custom. That is always the way it's been. Sometimes it was because the men had day jobs that they would go to provide income for their family. In the video clip that we saw just a few moments ago, Dorothy and Mark talk about two of the women that we met on our trip. And I would like to tell you a little more of their stories. So if you could put the first picture up, Steve. This is Doreen. Doreen is the mother of 5 children. She's 34 years old. Her oldest child is 17 and is learning to be a tailor. Mumo is her youngest, and you can, that's not him. That's a neighbor's little girl that is sitting on her lap there. And this next picture, if you can put up the next one, that is her daughter, Petronella, who is kind of shyly looking out at us from behind a tree. Petronella is 10. And we were in Kenya and had the opportunity to visit with Doreen at the end of Kenya's rainy season, a good season for many of the women in Kenya. Doreen only has to walk right now a few kilometers to find relatively clean water off of a rock catchment. But the availability of this water lasts for only a short time. When the water from the rock catchment dries up, Doreen next goes to the Viulu water pan. That was the water source that you saw us drawing water from in the video. It is 15 kilometers from her house. And so to supply her family with water from this water pan, Doreen gets up at 1 o'clock in the morning. And she walks. If she's really lucky, a neighbor allows her to use the neighbor's donkey to carry the water. But if she does, then she has to divide the water with the neighbor. So a donkey can carry 4 jerry cans. If she's able to use a donkey, then she can bring back 4 jerry cans, 2 for her and 2 for her neighbor. That's 10 gallons of water for the family for a day. If she cannot borrow the donkey, then she has to carry that 80 pounds of water back to her family. She gets home at about 8 o'clock in the morning in time to get her children ready for school, if they can go, if they're not sick. And she has to make sure that she has water to send with her children to school because their school has no access to water. So each child has to bring their daily water to school. I asked Doreen if she ever faced any kind of danger as she's walking out in the middle of the night to go to this water pan and get water, and she said, yes, she has to watch out for lions and hyenas. That sounds pretty dangerous to me. And then one of the World Vision staff explained that her trek to get to the Viulu water pan takes her directly into one of the natural game reserves in Kenya. That's why she has to watch out for lions and hyenas. Another danger that they face is the hippopotamus. And the hippopotamus actually kills more people every year in Kenya than any other animal. And the reason is because they leave the water at night to go forage throughout the night, and then they're coming back to the water pan to their safety in the daytime, in the morning. And that's their safe zone. And if anybody's in the way between them and their safety net, the water, they'll charge them and kill them. And so oftentimes if people are at the water pan in the early morning or washing clothes or getting water, anything, and a hippopotamus comes back, they can be killed by that hippopotamus. Jane was another mother that we met on that first day. Another village woman who uses the water pan during the rainy season. Can you put up there's Jane, and that is 3 of her children there with her. Jane is a mother of 7 children. Faith, is 17, then she has Alice, Daniel, Israel, Beatrice, Catherine, and Aaron is the little boy that she is holding there. Jane gets her family's water for several months a year from that same Viulu water pan that Doreen talked about. And for Jane, this water pan is actually relatively close to her home. It's only a few kilometers for her to walk. But the real nightmare for both Doreen and Jane happens from October to March, and that is Kenya's hot season, their arid season. Then they have to walk 20 or more kilometers. That is over 12 miles. 12 miles one way to the Kasangu riverbed, where the villagers dig shallow wells to try to get water. Sometimes they have to wait in line, and the owners of the land charge them for that water. Jane told us that during those months, October to March, the women of the village pretty much stop sleeping, as they have to get up at 4 o'clock in the morning to begin their walk, and they don't return until 2 o'clock in the afternoon. Those fortunate to have a donkey, as I said, can bring home 4 jerry cans of water. Those not so fortunate have to carry 2 jerry cans of water 12 miles back home every day. I can't even imagine that. And that is all the water that their families have for cooking, washing, drinking, whatever you might need for water. As we sat under the shade tree at Jane's homestead listening to her talk, we saw these children and these women kind of walking through the corn up to her homestead. And if you put up the next picture, here they are. They've gathered behind us. They're sitting behind us. They had a row of chairs for us. Always, they would sweep the ground, the dirt ground. They would sweep the dirt ground and place these chairs out for us to sit in. And then they would sit on the dirt or on a little bench and listening. I discovered on our first day in Kenya that the Kenyans are a very soft-spoken people who would politely answer all of our questions, who allowed us to touch their children. These children, who I'm sure had never seen many people who looked like us before, they would shyly come up to us, and if we held out our hands, then they would place their little hand in our hand, and it felt like a butterfly landed. You know, it was so light. They would just lay their little hand there in your hand, and then they would withdraw it and walk back. Their mothers wanted us to see the white spots on their heads. That comes from a fungus that they get from drinking dirty water. They talked about how often their children have stomach problems from the water that they drink. These were not healthy, active children that we saw at Doreen or Jane's homesteads. These were children struggling to survive. We met Doreen and Jane and the other mothers and their children on our first day in Kenya. And after talking with Jane and these women who showed up, we went with them to that Viulu water pan. And I think I have a picture of that. There, yeah, that's Lois and Tony filling jerry cans. They wanted to show us where they got their water and how they got their water. Now that water pan, and it's not very big, you can stand there and see all the way around it. That water pan supplies water for 20,000 people and animals. It was a really strange experience for me and for the others who were on this trip to be at this water pan. I think when we saw it and we began filling up those jerry cans with water, we were appalled at the condition of the water that we were scooping out and pouring into those cans. It wasn't just reddish brown from all of the sediment, but there were a lot of big black floating kind of things in that water as well. And as I poured the water into one of the jerry cans, I could see the inside of it, and inside the jerry can had large black spots on the inside. And you know, my first thought was, they should wash these out. And then I thought, and what would they use to wash them out with? Dirty water. So while we're experiencing firsthand the reality, it was like it just kind of hit us in the face, I think. The reality of this dirty water that people were scooping up. The villagers were so excited to have us join them, to see us leaning down to scoop water into those jerry cans. And I think that they really got a kick out of that. And then while all that's going on, our World Vision trip leader, Chris, was busy taking pictures and telling us, smile, so you see us. It's so odd as I look at the pictures. We're scooping up this putrid water, smiling as we're pouring it into a jerry can. And I think all of us felt like anything but smiling at that point. And yet the villagers were just so happy that we were there with them. It almost seemed like a party atmosphere. And when we were done, a couple of the men in our group carried 2 of those filled jerry cans. I mean, they each took 2 of those jerry cans and carried them just up the path to where the donkeys were tied. And I think that they gained an appreciation for the strength and the stamina that it would take to carry 2 of those jerry cans of water for any kind of distance at all, let alone 12 miles. Later that night, we were back at the Acacia Shade Hotel. We were sitting around a table with our cold, clear, bottled water in front of us. And Chris asked us our highs and our lows of that day. And I think that might have been the moment when it really hit all of us, that we had just shared a small part of one day with these women who were so open to talking to us about their daily lives and the struggles that they faced and sharing their children with us. And then we went quickly to the safety of our bottled water. And while we were sitting there sipping from our clean bottles of water, those same women and children and babies were drinking that dirty water that we had filled their jerry cans with. That was the moment when the tears started to flow for some of us who were sitting around that table. And I can only speak for myself, but I felt a mixture of sorrow and anger. Sorrow that there were babies and children drinking that horrible water that I wouldn't let my own kids get close to. And anger that is still the case for so many people in this world, even today. The woman at the well in the Gospel of John, hers is an unfortunate fate. However, she finds herself in that situation. Yet Jesus talks to her. Jesus notices this woman. I have no doubt that Jesus went to Samaria knowing that that woman would be at that well at that time of day. He knows her plight, but that doesn't stop Jesus from offering her the very best that he has to give her. He offers her living water, something very different than what I've been talking about with Doreen and Jane. He offers her living water, love and acceptance and salvation of a kind that she has never known before in her life. He offers her life in his name. But as I think about this woman at the well in the Gospel of John, I can't help but think of Doreen and Jane. If they are like most Kenyans, then they have put their faith in Christ Jesus. 80% of Kenyans are Christians. And I will tell you that in every little strip mall kind of a place that we drove by, there would be at least one, maybe 2 little churches. There was the Grace of God Church and the Praise Glory to Jesus Church. I mean, they all had different names, but there were all these little churches where people gathered. These moms that we met, these village women, are part of the community of believers. They are the church. And what you and I experienced this morning as we got up and prepared to come to worship is beyond their ability to even imagine. To have water come out of a faucet, to have water in your home and not have to walk for miles to find it, to have clean water that you know will not make your children sick. This would sound too good to be true to them, except that they have heard of it. We weren't the first visitors that came and asked Doreen and Jane to tell us their stories. They have been meeting with visitors and asking for help to get clean water for some years now. They have been waiting for this. Doreen and Jane and so many of the other mothers in Africa, they already have experienced the living water that Jesus offers. They need the good old plain clean water that we have at our fingertips every day. Doreen and Jane and the many other women in Kenya and in other countries in Africa whose lives are completely centered around getting water for their families. These women are part of our family. And they have been waiting and hoping for so long for something you and I take for granted. I know that as a church, we have been giving to Wellspring for 7 years, and I've lost count of the number of wells that we have sponsored. I think it's somewhere like 37, something like that. But I want you to know this morning, I think what we really had hit home for us is that this isn't just about doing something that makes us feel good. Maji ni uhai. Water is life. Literally, it is life. And that makes this a justice issue. This isn't just something that we can do to make ourselves feel better. This is something we must do if we are going to faithfully follow Jesus Christ. These are God's children, and doing whatever it takes to bring clean water to people in Kenya and around the world is all about following Jesus' command that we love one another. I don't know how we can come to God in our prayers and profess our love for God if we're okay with letting God's children die every day from drinking dirty water. Can you imagine sitting by and allowing your grandchildren or your nieces or nephews to drink that water that we showed up on the screen? You know, as I was getting close to walking up to the water's edge with my pitcher and my jerry can, and I heard somebody yell, don't step in the water. Like, you know, I'm getting too close. They didn't want my feet to get wet. And I'm thinking, these people are going to drink this stuff. Like, I don't even want my feet to touch it, and they're going to drink it. It was just such an amazing moment. These mothers don't have a choice but to pour that dirty water out for their children, but we do. We have a choice. Jesus made it clear that these people are our family, and they need us to help them have life. It's that simple. Would you please pray with me? Dear God, we thank you for the many blessings that are so common to us that we take them for granted, such as the gift of clean water readily available, clean air that we enjoy every day, the gift of sunshine. Thank you for all the ways that water blesses us in our washing, our drinking, growing our food supplies, and so much more. Expand our capacity for gratitude, that we not always take these things for granted, but stop and give you thanks. And expand our hearts, that when we see your children going without even the most basic of necessities, we will feel compelled to respond however we can. Those of us who had the opportunity to go to Africa, ask that you would bless the telling of our story, that we might bring others on this journey. As Jesus taught us, so we pray. Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation,